first speaker, which is Beatriz Acevedo from SUMA. Beatriz, are you available?
I'm here.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Good morning. Buenos días to everyone.
This is exciting. So we are going to talk about using your Latinidad as a superpower, as an asset, right? I think we have struggled. Many of us have stories where we have, especially in professional environments, where we have felt like we've had to show less of who we are. So I am excited to dive into this conversation with you, Beatriz. This is amazing.
Thank you.
So let's start quickly with like a brief overview of what is Latinidad. I know that can be.
I know you asked me this question like a few minutes before we started, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know that I have like the encyclopedia definition of Latinidad. And I quickly Googled it and there was so much there, but I'll just answer what it means for me and how I use it in my everyday life and in every one of the businesses that I've built. But for me, it's just really being, using every single thing that makes you different because of your culture, because of your upbringing, because of that very distinct point of view that tends to be unique when you are that only one or first one in a room. And instead of trying to minimize all the things from your culture, I try to amplify it, right? So using everything that is personal to me of my upbringing to really make the best use that I can personally and professionally. So I can tell you that in every single company that I've built, I've leaned hard into my culture, into my Latinidad, to make them successful businesses. And I know there's so much controversy, as we heard in the introduction, of like, the calladita te ves más bonita is so ingrained in us. The other day, my mom said, I know you don't like the phrase calladita te ves más bonita. So how about en boca cerrada no entran moscas? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's even worse. But I think that when, when our moms or when our abuelitas had to come to this country, being quiet, keeping your head down, not making a lot of waves was something that served them well, right? They wanted to sort of be invisible at that moment. And that was passed on to us just with fear, right? Like, we're here, it's a new country. Some of them have had different immigration status. So just be low key, just be invisible, just keep your head down, just be quiet. But for our generation, and certainly our daughters or nieces' generation, that is definitely not serving. So I would encourage everyone here to be super proud of their Latinidad, which really, to me, like I said, means where we come from and everything that makes us who we are because of our culture and our traditions and all the incredible things that we've learned from our families, from what we grew up eating or listening to, or the sayings that we love. All of those things are part of our Latinidad.
I love that. I have experienced so much of that, and I think many of us, where we've had to kind of shun some of that. So what does it mean, especially in a work environment, when we want to get ahead and get farther? We can think to ourselves, if I show a little bit too much culture, that can hinder me, right? So what are your thoughts on that? How does that translate into a work environment?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's two very distinct point of view on that, and they're contradicting, right? I was reading this Harvard Business Review article that said, don't be loud and don't overuse your hands, and don't wear hoops, which of course I'm wearing here. I didn't say don't wear hoops, the Harvard article, but did say, women who, really tend to bring their true selves to work tend to have less of a chance of, being promoted or becoming CEOs or presidents. And I don't want to dismiss that. I don't want to say that people have not had that experience by any means. I've personally used it in an opposite way. I mean, I definitely do not, but people even in my office say, are we being too loud, right? At a place where, we tend to be the only Latinas. And I'm like, no, like, this is how we speak. And to me, this is my normal Latina voice. Or, are we being too enthusiastic? Are we using our hands too much? I use my hands all the time. For me, it served me well, right? I I'm very proud to walk into a room, particularly when everyone is the same, as I call it, a sea of sameness when you see that. And that is the way you stand out in that room. For some people, it's uncomfortable. It's worked in my own benefit. So I'm not going to say, maybe for you and your work, being too Latina is going to be incredibly positive, and then God forbid that doesn't happen. I'm just speaking out of my own experience. I like to take up a lot of space in the rooms that I walk into on purpose as a Latina, with my voice, with my accent, with my red lipstick, with my hoops, with the snacks that I bring to eat, all of it, right? I just lean very, very hard, and that has served me well. I'm incredibly privileged to be, one of the Latinas that is in that stat of 1% that gets to, or 1 or 2% that gets to be funded, 1 or 2% that gets to sit on corporate boards, 1 or 2% that gets to be on the C-suite. And I've never traded my culture, my Latinidad, my loud voice, my enthusiasm, for anything, right? I think people who want me to be a part of these conversations, of these companies, of these boards, really hire me because of that. They're not expecting me to go and be quiet and be super vanilla, like some people say, right? Just to be super like everyone else. Like, the expectation of me being in those rooms is that I'm going to be me. So I think that the biggest thing for somebody that might be a bit afraid of doing that, and I love to see my friend Ana Valdez here, is to really know the data of the value that you bring to the organization. Because you're a Latina, what good would you do if you are like everyone else? If you are not proud or are not informed enough to say, listen, and why I mentioned Ana is obviously with the incredible work that she does with the LDC and all the incredible data that she gives us every single year, where you're able to walk in the rooms proudly to say, listen, if you're not in business with Latinas, with Latinos, with people in our community, there's no way you're going to be able to grow, right? And really know those facts, really know those stats, really carry yourself with a lot of swagger and your head high, that if it wasn't because of us, GDP would not be growing at the rate that it's growing in the US. Workforce would not be growing at the rate that it is. Like, entrepreneurship would not be anywhere near launching companies without Latinas, even when we get the least amount of capital, even when we get the least amount of supports being in those places of privilege or on those C-suites. So for me, it's always advocating for who we really are, not for who people think or have their unconscious bias of who they think we are or how media has portrayed us, but who we really are and how much they need us, fully as ourselves, fully with our Latinidad, fully with our, maybe not everybody has a loud voice like me, but with our enthusiasm that our culture gives us in these places. So I think the data is a really, really strong asset that we have, that we really need to know really, really well. I think my kids can recite every single piece of data that Ana and the LDC have put out, and they roll their eyes because they're like, we know Latinos are the so-and-so. But you know what? Now that they did their, college essays, and they asked them, what are they proud of? How can they contribute? How are they going to do better in the world? They have that data available. And I'm incredibly grateful that we have that as our arm of why we need to be in those rooms, why we need to be ourselves, and why we need to bring our entire culture into these organizations, whether you're an employee or whether you're building a company.
I love that so much, Beatriz. Like, we often, why are we loud, first of all, right? Like, I've always been told that, like, oh, you're so loud. I'm like, well, I'm just talking normally. I mean, how many people in the audience, like, how many of you have been told you're loud or you have a loud voice? And I love that you said that it is part of our enthusiasm. We have this love and thirst for life. And I think that is innate, part of our heritage.
My mom lives with us. So my husband's always asking me, are you fighting with your mom? Or that's just the way you guys talk? I'm like, no, that's just the way we talk. We're enthusiastically debating some topic. So anyway, yeah. But listen, whether it's that or anything else. Some people might be quiet, and that's okay. That does not make you less Latino or Latina. But whatever it is that you are proud of, I think for many years people thought, I need to repress that. I need to fit in more, I need to be more mainstream. And I need to be like the others to be promoted. For me, it definitely worked the other way around. I don't think I would be invited to a lot of, important tables if I was like everybody else and if I just blended in with everyone else. I think the expectation they have is that I'm going to bring, my whole culture and knowledge of my community into these places.
Yeah. I think the loudness is just part of our intention, especially when you're loud in a space, you have something to say and you're passionate about it. So definitely take up space. I love that you said that. So what about when we think about it on a negative, like how can we overcome stereotypes that we may see in the perceptions of Latinidad in the workplace when it comes to stereotypes?
I mean, overcoming stereotypes is hard, right? Because obviously, to who? Like, I mean, as long as you don't have a stereotype for yourself. I think for me, when we talk about, I think media plays a really critical role. And it's incredibly depressing to see how little we are represented in media. And whenever we are represented, we're badly represented, right? So obviously, many people think perception is reality, and the perception that people have of Latinos is completely wrong at times. But as long as you don't have that perception, I mean, my biggest concern about media, more than what others think about me or my kids or my family or my own community, is less than what media does to ourselves, to our kids, right? Is media limiting us in how big we think we can dream, right? If you never see yourself as a CEO or as an astronaut or as a whatever role that now we're seeing incredible Latinas fill these roles, and that's amazing. But if you don't grow up seeing that, is it limiting the belief of our own children of how big you can dream? How big can you aspire to be? And that does not need to be a CEO by any means, right? There is incredible jobs that don't need to be in a C-suite or don't need to be, an entrepreneur, but just that doesn't limit the way we see ourselves. So that's really my concern when it comes to changing stereotypes, that we change them for ourselves, that we don't believe them ourselves. To change, a neighbor or to change a work colleague, I guess we'll change it with our work. We'll change it, the moment they see. I've had to, beg CEOs to take Latino kids as interns that don't come from Ivy League schools, right? And I say, can you please take these kids who are extraordinary, but they're opportunity youth. They might have been in foster care. They might have been previously incarcerated. They're not at an Ivy League school. They're potentially at a, community college, which they are the ones I hire first, because everybody else already has an opportunity. And the bias is always strong, right? Oh my gosh, I don't know that I want these opportunity youth kids when I can have an Ivy League kid that's also a Latino or a Black kid or a woman or a person with a disability. And I'm like, can you please give them an opportunity? How the stereotypes changes within a few months. They're like, oh my God, these kids are extraordinary. We've never seen somebody with such a work ethic, with such a hustle, so grateful for these opportunities. So I think the way we change stereotypes for others is just being ourselves, showing, not for anybody else that you're going to show your value, but being ourselves. We know we are hardworking. We know we are honest. We know we are community driven. We know there's so many characteristics of how extraordinary Latinos are that should help change the stereotype. But my biggest stereotype that I want to change is with the younger generations or with ourselves. When we say, I don't know that I can do this, or this is going to be too hard, or I look at the data and I'm never going to get funding, or I'll never get to that role, or I'm never going to get that promotion. That's the first stereotype we have to change within ourselves. Everything is possible. We see Latinas thriving every day. Is it harder for many of them? 100%, right? You have to overcome so much. You're already starting the race way behind everyone else. So succeeding is like, oh my gosh, against all odds, we succeeded, but we see Latinas doing it every single day. A lot of them on the book that you guys just published, and all of them on this call that I see the names out there. So there's plenty of examples for us to not believe those stereotypes that we've been told for, many generations before. And know that, like we heard at the beginning, and like our, friend Dolores Huerta says, si se puede. We have to work harder and we shouldn't, yes, but that's where we're at in this generation. Hopefully our daughters or our nieces won't need to do that.
I love that. I love that. We have to do what we needs to do until we're across that line. So let's talk briefly about the idea of collectivism, which is a lot of our culture. We look out for the community versus self-reliance in a business setting, right? Because we have to, when many of us have uncovered, like we have to be self-reliant to a degree, yet really understanding how we can bring others up with us at the same time, right? So including both of those, because it's like, if you're in business, you have to look out for you. You got to be self-reliant. And I think that is, especially for my generation, it's always been, you hear the term, the crabs in a barrel syndrome. Like if you're the only Latina in the leadership team, you think, well, if there's another one, I have to they're only going to take one up there, like there's only space for one of us to be up there, versus really advocating for the power of our collectivism in those spaces as well, not fighting for position, but really claiming the fact that, we can do much better when we work together. But what are your thoughts on that, on self-reliance and collectivism?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's very ingrained in our culture of, others before self, just in the way we grew up. I'll get to the workplace in a second. But, the American ethos is definitely very self-reliant, self before others. We learn in our families, it's others before self. And that's the problem that I have to this day, where on my priority list, my name is at the very, very bottom, right? First is like, okay, my kids and my mom and my husband and, my colleagues at work, and everyone else is top of my list before I put myself on the list. And that's a very cultural thing. I think that when it comes to the workplace, though, super interesting that you bring this up. There's been so much scarcity, right? Like real, you guys had that data and those numbers at the beginning of how little, particularly Latinas, have gotten, that I feel that with my generation, the older Latinas, in our 50s or 60s, there are some, not everybody, that tend to be a bit less generous, right? With saying, okay, let me bring in the next generation of Latinas, because maybe that's how they feel. Well, I don't want to be replaced, or there's only room for me. That's another area where I've been pretty rebellious, right? Even when I didn't have a mentor, right? Or no, people are like, well, nobody helped me, why am I going to help? And I didn't have like a clear path of a sponsor, a mentor, somebody helping me guide, where to go next, or how do I advance in my career. I never think that way, right? I think that, the way you building social equity, I think, is the most important thing, more than you hanging on to those roles or positions that you don't want to share with others. The way I've done it, which I learned this term very recently, actually, somebody was like, you've built so much social equity, and I had to Google it. But really why I think that is which really, if I call somebody and I ask for something, they're always willing to help, because I'm always willing to help. I always show up, and I actually rarely would ask something for me. It's always really for somebody else, particularly another Latina that I'm trying to support. So I think that, the more generous that you are, I think that mentality of the crabs in the bucket is completely off. I think the more generous that you are, I'm a firm believer in the universe. I'm not generous for me to be rewarded. That I was born, I guess, with that sort of personality. The better you end up doing, right? It's just really, really true. And if at some point, I have a list of Latinas that are ready for boards, that are ready for keynotes, that are ready for interviews, and I promote them every single day. Every single day, I'm promoting other Latinas. And the opportunities don't stop coming for me ever, right? So I do encourage everybody to think that way. The more you give, the more you'll have. And it is our time to really bring up other Latinas. I want to make sure that when I'm no longer in this world or I'm no longer in the workforce, there is a strong bench of talented Latinas ready to lead. And we know we have them in our community. Talent is equal, opportunity is not. And it is on us to open those doors to opportunity for as many people in our community as we can.
Wow, Beatrice, I mean, we can go on for another half hour. This has been amazing. I mean, just all of the knowledge that you've dropped, taking up space, advocating for others. There's more than enough space for all of us at the top. I think is such a resonating message. It's not going to hurt you when you're helping other Latinas. So we're all helping the cause and helping each other in that way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And listen, I think we're out of time, right? I don't know. I'm very long-winded in my answers, but I do want to, before we go, you know, my latest startup that I'm working in is all about financial health. You know, not having economic power will not give us power in this country, unfortunately, and really understanding our finances, understanding all the things that we didn't talk in our sobremesa growing up in our families, we want to address at Suma Wealth. So we want to make sure that everybody here gets an opportunity to have a free premium membership that we call our wealth building membership. And there's a link that I know we were going to post somewhere here for everyone who wants to take advantage of it to check it out. So you'll get a financial Olympia, financial checkup, not with Sage or an egg, but with data science on your finances. And then, you know, the good AI money coach will help you stay on track. So for anybody who wants to check it out, we'd love to gift you guys some memberships.
That is amazing.
I just posted the link.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Beatriz. This has been amazing. And yeah, I don't know if you have any last statement, but everything that you've shared was gold, and we see a lot of comments in the chat. So thank you so very, very much.
Thank you guys for having me. And I can't wait to hear from the other amazing panelists that I so much respect. Thank you, everyone. Have a great conference.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, guys, we are moving on to our next panel discussion. This is going to be an amazing conversation between